My name is Gabrielle Higgins, and we are doing our presentation on advocacy for human trafficking victims. Now, there are two forms of human trafficking, and the first one is labor trafficking, and that is whenever a person is forced to work for somebody. And because of Robeson County's agriculture-based economy, it's common, but it goes unidentified because the trafficking victims are kept on land and they're not out in the open. So a majority of these victims are men from Latin America, and what tends to happen is that they come to America with a visa, they work on somebody's property, the visa expires, and then their employer keeps them working, and then by the time that they're able to leave, they are scared to because their visa is expired, so they're going to get arrested and deported. So the next form of trafficking is sex trafficking, and this is 98% female. And it commonly occurs in hotels, motels, at traffic stops, and rest areas. And these locations are all on I-95, and since it is a major highway, a lot of the times the victims are coming from a lot of areas. And this, on I-95, it's a majority of minors being exploited. So gangs also contribute to human trafficking a lot, and there are 52 documented gangs in Robeson County, and they target anybody. So that can be minors, college students, people who deal with substance abuse, etc. Native American communities are also disproportionately affected by human sex trafficking because of high rates of substance abuse, sexual and physical abuse, homelessness, runaway individuals, and the population's history of sexual exploitation, such as with colonizers.
Hi, I'm April McCoy, and how has policy and society historically oppressed victims of human trafficking? Well, there were policies put in place. In 1910, there was the Mann Act, and the Mann Act was amended in 1986. It criminalizes the transportation of minors and coercing of adults to travel across state lines or foreign countries for the purposes of engaging in commercial sex. This act covers traveling outside the state lines and foreign borders, but does not cover anything about it happening inside the borders. There was also the Tariff Act of 1930. It prohibits importing goods made from those that were victims of human trafficking. And also, another thing that bothers, that happens is gender discrimination and feminization of poverty. With this causes a height in human trafficking. And the first policy that was made to actually help these victims was the TVPA, which is the trafficking trafficking victims. Oh gosh,
Protection
y'all.
Act.
Protection Act. It is right there in my face. Oh Lord. So this act actually put protections against sex trade in the United States. What type of stereotypes generated historically against human trafficking victims? It doesn't happen in the United States. Every year there are thousands of people who are victims of human trafficking here in the United States. For a long time, they were called prostitutes, sort of like a pimp, a prostitute, or whatever. But today, they're no longer called prostitutes. And instead of locking them up, they are now giving them rehabilitation to help them with stuff like PTSD. only runaways and homeless people are victims of human trafficking. That's not true. That's another stereotype. There was a little girl by the name of Shania, and she was here in North Carolina, and she lived with her father, and she was actually human trafficked by her mother, and it kind of touched home because it was right here, really close to us in North Carolina. And another thing, another stereotype is only children and women are victims of human trafficking. And that's not true. There are males that are victims of human trafficking. Here in the United States, it's kind of not unheard of, but the percentage is lower because it's mostly women and children. But there are boys who are victims of sex trafficking, human trafficking. And what value systems of policies that are oppressive to these victims of human trafficking? Well, today there are many policies in place to help victims of human trafficking. The TVPA 2000 that I just spoke of earlier, and then there are where they amended the act, and it's the TVPRA. And they have in 2003, 2005, 2008, and 2013 they were amended.
Although social policies do seek to help victims of human trafficking, some of them do have unintended consequences. So in Nevada, they legalize prostitution as long as it's in brothels, but that just makes it easier to hide the trafficking of individuals because you can say, oh, they consent, they want to work for me, they want to do these sexual things. And also, on the contrary, how prostitution is illegal around the United States. That means that prostitutes, which are trafficking victims, get arrested, and they don't want to identify themselves as trafficking victims because they don't think that they are victims, or they have Stockholm syndrome where they have formed an attachment to their trafficker, or they know that if they do identify themselves, it doesn't matter because they don't trust authority and they think that they're just going to get arrested while their pimps, which is their traffickers, are home free. And then if they do get arrested, then once they are released, they just have to go back to their trafficker because that's all that they know. The human rights that tend to be violated because of this is the fact that everyone is free and equal. No, they're not, because they're being enslaved, which is also freedom from slavery. That's a basic human right. And then the freedom of movement, where you're free to move wherever you want. And obviously victims of human trafficking don't have a say in where they want to go or what they want to do.
Hi, I'm Danielle Parker, and I'm going to be talking about the effective ways to help victims of human trafficking, as well as advocacy for the victims. Human trafficking can be a very traumatic experience, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking, and it can cause many emotional effects like panic disorder, anxiety, or PTSD. It can also cause physical injuries from violence that may have been inflicted on the victim. There are many ways that you can help this population. The first way is mental health counseling, or mental health services or counseling. Since these victims have been traumatized so badly, they usually need specialized counseling, which covers post-traumatic stress disorder or cognitive behavioral therapy, or it helps them gain support systems or connect with people that might be able to help them get over what they've suffered to some extent. Okay, so other things that might be helpful are trauma-focused therapies, and group counseling might have a good effect also, because they're surrounded by people that already know what they've been through, and that might help them heal in some way. For advocacy is very important because it can help raise self-awareness or awareness of human trafficking. One of the agencies that helps with advocacy for trafficked persons is the Legal Aid Agency in Raleigh, and they have a bunch of speakers that help educate law enforcement or people in the community about human trafficking and how serious this crime actually is.
Hi, my name is Tamika Walker. I will be discussing ways to advocate for victims of sex and forced labor, human trafficking. Normally, most people that are victims, you won't see them with a sign on their head that says, "Help me." You have to look for signs. And some of the signs to look for would be like poor mental health or abnormal behavior. The victim could have actions of being fearful, anxious, depressed. They may avoid eye contact with you. They may act nervous and paranoid. You could look for poor physical health, like malnourishment, physical abuse, signs of sexual abuse, and restraint. You may notice that they may have a lack of self-control, like someone else is controlling their lives. The victim may not be able to speak for themselves. Most of the time, foreigners can't really speak English anyway, so it may be an interpreter there. So you could look for aggressive behavior between their relationship, signs of stuff like, whether they're being too aggressive instead of just helping them speak English. The victim may not have any personal possessions. So those are signs that you can look for. This is really called modern day slavery. So just to, you may see stuff like back in the day when slavery was going on, like signs of people, with whips and stuff, but you're not going to see that in modern day slavery. So the way to advocate for the victims, we can use like commercial advertisement. The commercial advertisements can help convey the message about human sex and labor trafficking. Advertisements can bring awareness within the homes, online, and in businesses. We can also use poster pinups. Poster pinups are great ways to bring awareness because they can contain contact information about hotlines, the local police department numbers, and organizations that help the victims. Lord. Okay. There can be some ethical dilemmas as a social worker. They may face ethical dilemmas while advocating for this population. There are many foreigners that are victims of human trafficking in the U.S. The social worker should be aware of their responsibility to their client. The social worker may experience an ethical dilemma in cultural competence and social diversity. If the victim doesn't speak English, the social worker may have difficulty understanding the specific needs of their client. It is also necessary for the social worker to understand the victim's culture. If the social worker doesn't understand their client's culture, it would be difficult for the social worker to effectively help the client. So that's some dilemmas that social worker may run into, or anybody that's trying to help these victims. Strategies that comply with the NASW Code of Ethics. The dignity and worth of a person guarantees that the social worker will treat every client respectfully and help to promote the client's social responsibility and self-determination. The social worker that's advocating for the victim of human trafficking should resolve conflicts between clients' interests and the broader society interests. And this will conclude our video of human sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Thank you very much.